I'm holding a combat report that should have never been filed. This is the after-action report of Oberleutnant Franz Stigler, Luftwaffe fighter pilot, March 15, 1944. Somewhere over central Germany, Stigler was a veteran, 37 confirmed kills, Knight's Cross recipient. He'd survived the Battle of Britain, North Africa, the Eastern Front. He knew how to fight. He knew how to win. On March 15, 1944, he met an American fighter he'd been taught to mock, the P-47 Thunderbolt, the Jug. In his report, Stigler wrote 8 words that changed Luftwaffe fighter doctrine. Das amerikanische Flugzeug sollte nicht unterschätzt werden. The American aircraft should not be underestimated. That's German military understatement for, this thing almost killed me. But before March 15th, before Franz Stigler learned to respect the Jug, there were 6 months of mockery. 6 months of German pilots laughing at the fat American fighter. 6 months of calling it the Jug, short for juggernaut, a joke about its size, its weight, its ugliness. Then the P-47 started killing them, and the jokes stopped. September 8, 1943. Jagdgeschwader 26 Airfield, Lille Nord, France. 6:42 a.m. Oberleutnant Franz Stigler walked across the tarmac toward his Focke-Wulf FW-190. Morning briefing had just ended. Intelligence reported a large American bomber formation heading toward Stuttgart. 800 B-17s, maybe more. The 8th Air Force was hitting German industrial targets again. But the intelligence officer had mentioned something else, something new. A new American fighter, the P-47 Thunderbolt. The briefing room had laughed. Hauptmann Klaus Mitusch, the squadron commander, had called it the Jug. He'd seen reconnaissance photos. The P-47 was massive, 7 tons fully loaded. The heaviest single-engine fighter anyone had ever built. It looked like someone had strapped wings to an oil barrel. "Gentlemen," Mitusch had said, "the Americans are sending us their bombers with fighter escorts. Unfortunately for them, they've chosen to escort with a flying bathtub." More laughter. Stigler didn't laugh. Not because he respected the P-47. He hadn't seen one yet. He didn't laugh because he'd learned not to underestimate anything that could fly over Germany and shoot back. But he also didn't think the P-47 would be a problem. His FW-190 weighed 3.5 tons. The P-47 weighed 7. Simple physics. The lighter aircraft would be faster, more maneuverable, better in a dogfight. The Americans had built a flying mistake. Stigler climbed into his FW-190. Engine start. Warm up. He checked his weapons. 4 20mm cannons, 2 13mm machine guns, 800 rounds total. Enough ammunition to destroy 4 B-17s if he was efficient. He'd never needed to think about ammunition for fighting other fighters. The FW-190 could kill a Spitfire with 1 good burst, maybe 2 if the shot was hasty. A P-47 wouldn't be different. At 7:18 a.m., the scramble order came through. Stigler and 11 other FW-190s lifted off from Lille Nord. They climbed southwest toward the bomber stream. Intelligence put the American formation at 24,000 feet. Stigler's squadron climbed to 26,000. Attack from above. Dive through the escorts. Hit the bombers. Break away before the escorts could react. Standard doctrine. It had worked against Spitfires, against P-38 Lightnings, against every Allied fighter the Luftwaffe had faced. At 7:52 a.m., Stigler saw the bomber contrails. White lines across the blue sky, parallel formations, combat boxes, hundreds of B-17s flying in tight geometric patterns, and above them, weaving back and forth, the escorts. Stigler counted approximately 60 fighters. Some were P-38s, twin-engine, twin-boom, easy to identify. But most were single-engine, radial engine, stubby nose, thick wings, P-47s. Stigler keyed his radio. Jaeger, lead to all aircraft. P-47s at our altitude. Approximately 50 contacts. Prepare to engage. Mitusch's voice came back. Remember, gentlemen, they're heavy. They're slow. Use your speed. Don't get into a turning fight. Boom and zoom. Make one pass and break away." Stigler acknowledged. The German formation dove toward the bombers. 26,000 feet to 24,000. 500 miles per hour in the dive. The FW-190 accelerated like it always did. Smooth. Powerful. The American escorts were above the bombers, not expecting an attack from higher altitude. Tactical surprise. This would be quick. Stigler lined up his gun sight on a B-17 at the edge of the formation. His finger moved to the trigger. Range closing, 800 yards, 700, 600. Then something dark flashed across his canopy. A P-47 diving from above. Impossible. The P-47s had been at his altitude. Now one was above him, diving faster than his FW-190. Stigler broke left. Hard. The FW-190 rolled and turned. He looked up through the canopy. The P-47 was following. Not trying to turn with him, just diving, straight down, coming after him like a boulder rolling down a mountain. And it was gaining. Stigler pushed his stick forward. Dove. The FW-190 accelerated to 520 miles per hour, the fastest he'd ever flown in combat. The airframe shook. The controls stiffened. He looked back. The P-47 was still there. Closer now. 50 yards behind. 40. Stigler saw the nose light up. 8 points of light. 8 machine guns, all firing at once. The tracer rounds looked like a solid stream, not individual bullets. A beam of light reaching out from the P-47's nose directly toward his tail. Stigler broke right, pulled hard on the stick. The FW-190 shuddered. 4 Gs. 5. The engine screamed. The tracer stream followed him. 30 yards now. 25. This wasn't supposed to happen. The P-47 was supposed to be slow, supposed to be heavy, supposed to be easy. Stigler rolled inverted and pulled through. Split S maneuver, diving again, straight down. The altimeter unwound. 20,000 feet, 18,000, 15,000. He leveled out at 12,000 feet, checked his 6, empty sky. The P-47 was gone. Stigler's heart was hammering. His hands were shaking on the stick. His FW-190 had survived. No hits, no damage. But Franz Stigler, 37 kills, Knight's Cross, veteran of 3 fronts, had just been outflown by the American fighter everyone had mocked. The Jug, the fat, slow, ugly Jug, had just dove faster than the best fighter in the Luftwaffe inventory. Stigler climbed back to altitude, reformed with his squadron. The engagement was over. The P-47s had broken up the attack before it reached the bombers. The FW-190s had claimed 2 B-17s damaged. The Americans had lost 0 fighters. 0. When Stigler landed at Lille Nord at 9:34 a.m., Mitush was waiting. "Well, how was the Jug?" Stigler didn't smile. "Fast, very fast, faster than us in a dive." Mitush frowned. "That's not possible. The P-47 weighs twice what our fighters weigh." "I know what it weighs," Stigler said, "and I know what I saw. It dove faster than I've ever flown." That evening, Stigler wrote his combat report. He described the engagement, the dive, the speed, the 8 machine guns. He ended with 8 words. Das amerikanische Flugzeug sollte nicht unterschätzt werden. The American aircraft should not be underestimated. But Oberleutnant Franz Stigler didn't know the whole truth yet. He didn't know about the R-2800 double Wasp engine, 18 cylinders, 2,000 horsepower, the most powerful radial engine ever installed in a single-seat fighter. He didn't know about the turbo supercharger, the reason the P-47 could fly at 42,000 feet when German fighters were gasping at 35,000. He didn't know about the dive speed, 550 miles per hour, faster than any propeller-driven fighter in the world, faster than some early jets. He didn't know that each of those 8 50 caliber machine guns fired 800 rounds per minute. That's 6,400 rounds per minute combined. 106 rounds every second. A 5-second burst put over 500 bullets into the air. And he didn't know that the P-47 could absorb damage that would destroy any German fighter, that pilots were flying P-47s back to England with half a wing missing, engines shot out, tail sections shredded. Franz Stigler would learn all of this. Over the next 8 months, he would face P-47s 37 more times. He would shoot down 3. He would watch them shoot down 28 of his squadron mates, and he would stop calling them Jugs. September 8, 1943, Jagdgeschwader 26 Operations Room, Lille Nord, 8:15 p.m. Stigler's combat report sat on Hauptmann Mitusch's desk, 8 words at the bottom. The squadron commander read it twice. Then he called for the intelligence officer. "Get me everything we have on the P-47, technical specifications, performance data, everything." The intelligence officer returned 30 minutes later with a folder. Inside were reconnaissance photographs, a captured American technical manual, and reports from other Luftwaffe units that had encountered P-47s over France. Mitusch spread the documents across his desk. Stigler stood beside him. The first photograph showed a P-47 on the ground at an American airfield in England. The aircraft looked enormous. The fuselage was wider than a FW-190. The engine cowling dominated the nose. The wings were thick. The landing gear looked like it belonged on a bomber. 7 tons, Mitusch said. Empty weight, 4.5 tons. Fully loaded with fuel and ammunition, 7.9 tons. For comparison, the FW-190 weighed 3.5 tons fully loaded. The Bf-109 weighed 3.2 tons. The British Spitfire weighed 2.9 tons. The P-47 weighed more than 2 Spitfires combined. "How?" Mitusch asked. "Does something that heavy fly at all?" The intelligence officer pointed to the technical manual. The engine. Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp, 2 rows of 9 cylinders, 18 cylinders total, producing 2,000 horsepower. Stigler looked at the number. 2,000? Yes, sir. The FW-190 used a BMW 801 radial engine, 14 cylinders, 1,700 horsepower. The Bf-109 used a Daimler-Benz DB605 inline engine, 12 cylinders, 1,475 horsepower. The P-47 had 300 more horsepower than Germany's most powerful fighter engine, and 525 more than the Bf-109. But power wasn't the whole story. The intelligence officer turned to another page. The Americans installed a General Electric turbo supercharger. It's buried in the rear fuselage. That's why the P-47 is so large. The turbocharger allows the engine to maintain full power at altitude. The P-47 can fly at 42,000 feet. Mitusch looked up. 42,000? Yes, sir. The FW-190 begins losing performance above 32,000 feet. The Bf-109 above 36,000. The P-47 can maintain power and maneuverability 6,000 feet higher than anything we have. Stigler thought about his encounter that morning. The P-47 diving from above, from higher altitude. That explained the energy advantage. The American had started higher, dove faster, and still had enough power to climb back up. Armament? Mitusch asked. 8 Browning M2 50 caliber machine guns, 4 in each wing. Each gun fires 800 rounds per minute. Combined rate, 6,400 rounds per minute. Ammunition load, 425 rounds per gun. 400 rounds total. Mitusch did the mental calculation. That's 32 seconds of continuous fire. The FW-190 carried 800 rounds total for all 6 weapons, approximately 14 seconds of fire. The P-47 could shoot for more than twice as long, and the 50 caliber rounds were devastating. The intelligence report included damage assessments from recovered German aircraft. A single 50 caliber bullet could punch through aluminum skin, sever control cables, rupture fuel tanks. Multiple hits in the same area could saw through structural spars. "They're calling it the 7-ton sledgehammer," the intelligence officer said. "Some units are calling it the Jug, but the Americans call it the Thunderbolt." Mitusch closed the folder. He looked at Stigler. "This changes tactics. The P-47 is not a turning fighter. But in a dive, it's faster than anything we have. That means we can't dive away from them. We have to fight them in climbs and turns where we have the advantage." Stigler nodded, but he was thinking about something else, something the intelligence report hadn't mentioned. The P-47's most important advantage wasn't speed or firepower. It was survivability. September 22, 1943, over Emden, Germany, 11:34 a.m. 2 weeks after his first encounter, Stigler met P-47s again. This time he was prepared. This time he knew the tactics. Avoid diving away. Force them into turning fights. Use the FW-190's roll rate and maneuverability. The engagement started at 28,000 feet. 16 FW-190s from JG-26 versus approximately 30 P-47s from the 56th Fighter Group. The Americans were escorting B-17s hitting targets at Emden. Stigler's squadron attacked from the north, trying to separate the escorts from the bombers. At 11:34, Stigler locked onto a P-47 that had broken formation. The American fighter was diving toward a damaged B-17, trying to provide cover. Stigler dove after him. But this time he didn't chase. He anticipated. He cut the corner. He positioned his FW-190 where the P-47 would be, not where it was. The P-47 pilot saw him, broke left, hard turn. Stigler turned inside him. The FW-190 could outturn the heavier P-47. Stigler's turn radius was tighter. He was closing the angle. His gun sight swung toward the P-47's fuselage. Range 300 yards, 250, 200. Stigler fired. A 2-second burst, 40 rounds, 20mm cannons, and 13mm machine guns. He saw the impacts. Strikes along the P-47's left wing, the wing root, near the fuselage. The P-47 shuddered. Smoke, black smoke from the wing. But the aircraft kept flying. The P-47 didn't break apart, didn't spin, didn't fall. It kept turning. The American pilot kept fighting. Stigler fired again. Another burst, 50 rounds. More strikes. The P-47's fuselage was taking hits. He could see the metal tearing, could see pieces flying off, still flying. The P-47 rolled, inverted, and dove. Not a combat maneuver, an escape. Straight down, full throttle, running. Stigler followed. He was faster in the dive now. He'd learned. He didn't try to match the P-47's dive speed. He cut angles, anticipated. He was closing. But the P-47 leveled out at 8,000 feet. The engine was still running, still producing power. The aircraft turned north, heading toward England. Stigler looked at his fuel gauge. Low. He'd burned too much in the climb and dive. He couldn't chase the P-47 across the North Sea. He turned back toward Germany. Later, when he landed, Stigler reported the engagement as one P-47 damaged, probably destroyed. The aircraft had taken 40 to 50 cannon and machine gun hits. No aircraft should survive that. But 3 days later, intelligence received a report from agents in England. The P-47 had made it home. The pilot, Captain Walter Cook of the 61st Fighter Squadron, had landed at Halesworth with 127 bullet and shell holes in his aircraft. The left wing had lost 2 feet of structure. The engine had taken 3 20mm shells. One had gone completely through the cylinder block. The P-47 had flown 180 miles across the North Sea with an engine that should have seized, with a wing that should have collapsed, with damage that would have destroyed any German fighter. Captain Cook had walked away. The ground crew counted the holes, took photographs. Then they stripped the damaged panels, replaced the engine, patched the wing, and had the aircraft back in service in 4 days. When Stigler heard the report, he understood. The P-47 wasn't just fast, wasn't just powerful, wasn't just heavily armed. It was nearly indestructible. The Americans had built a fighter that could absorb punishment, keep flying, bring its pilot home, and be back in combat before the Luftwaffe could repair similar damage to a German aircraft. This wasn't about tactics anymore. This was about engineering. The Americans had designed a fighter that matched German engineering philosophy in every way except one: survivability. German fighters were optimized for performance: light, fast, maneuverable. Every kilogram mattered. Every component was designed to save weight. The P-47 was designed to bring pilots home: heavy armor plating behind the pilot, self-sealing fuel tanks, redundant control systems, structure that could lose pieces and still fly. The R-2800 engine could run with multiple cylinders destroyed. The P-47 could fly on 6 cylinders if necessary. German engines seized immediately when damaged. Over the next month, Stigler watched this pattern repeat: P-47s taking damage that should be fatal, returning to base, fighting again the next day. The Luftwaffe was shooting down P-47s, but not enough, not nearly enough, and the Americans kept building more. October 14, 1943, over Schweinfurt, Germany. 2:47 p.m. Stigler climbed through 18,000 feet when he saw something that made no sense. 6 P-47s, flying low, maybe 5,000 feet, breaking away from the bomber formation, diving toward the ground. Fighter aircraft didn't dive toward the ground in the middle of a mission. They stayed with the bombers. They protected the formation. That was their job. But these P-47s were going down, fast, headed toward something. Stigler banked left to follow. He wanted to see what they were doing. At 5,000 feet, the P-47s leveled out. They were approaching a railway marshalling yard west of Schweinfurt. German supply trains, ammunition, fuel, equipment heading to the front. The lead P-47 rolled inverted. Dove again, straight down toward the trains. Then Stigler saw what was under its wings: bombs. The P-47 was carrying bombs. 2 bombs, one under each wing, maybe 500 pounds each. The fighter released. The bombs fell. The P-47 pulled up hard. 3 Gs, 4. The bombs hit the rail yard. Massive explosions. 2 freight cars disintegrated. The concussion wave rippled across the yard. The second P-47 attacked, released. Another explosion. A locomotive erupted in steam and fire. The boiler had ruptured. Then the third P-47, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth. 12 bombs, 12 explosions. The marshalling yard was burning. Black smoke rising thousands of feet. 3 locomotives destroyed, 16 freight cars obliterated, the rail lines torn apart. And then the P-47s turned north, heading home. Mission complete. Stigler didn't chase them. He was too stunned. The Americans had converted their fighter into a fighter bomber. The same aircraft that escorted bombers at 28,000 feet could carry 1,000 pounds of bombs and destroy ground targets. The same aircraft. Stigler landed at Lille-Nord at 3:34 p.m. He went directly to operations. Mitusch was already there. He'd received reports from other units, multiple P-47 attacks on ground targets across western Germany, railway stations, fuel depots, airfields, communication centers. They're using their fighters as ground attack aircraft, Mitusch said, escorting bombers to the target, then attacking ground targets on the way home. Stigler looked at the mission reports. Over 40 separate attacks. Approximately 120 P-47s involved. Estimated damage: 20 locomotives destroyed, over 80 rail cars destroyed, 4 fuel depots destroyed, 2 airfields damaged, in one day, by aircraft that were supposed to be escorting bombers. "This changes everything," Stigler said. Mitusch nodded. The Americans aren't just using the P-47 for air superiority. They're using it for interdiction. They're destroying our logistics, our supply lines, and we can't stop them because if we intercept them on the ground attack, the bombers get through unopposed. The mathematics were brutal. If the Luftwaffe defended against the bombers, the P-47s destroyed ground targets. If the Luftwaffe attacked the P-47s, the bombers destroyed industrial targets. The Americans had created a tactical dilemma with no solution. And it got worse. October 28, 1943. Intelligence briefing, JG-26 headquarters. The intelligence officer presented new information, analysis of P-47 ground attack tactics, damage assessments, loss rates. The P-47 can carry 2 500-pound bombs, or one 1,000-pound bomb, or drop tanks for extended range. The pilot decides based on mission requirements. When carrying bombs, the P-47 maintains full combat capability. The bombs are released, and the aircraft immediately transitions to air-to-air combat. Mitush studied the photographs. P-47s with bombs, P-47s with drop tanks, P-47s with both. "What are their losses?" he asked. The intelligence officer consulted his notes. In ground attack missions during October, the Americans lost 6 P-47s, 3 to anti-aircraft fire, 2 to German fighters, 1 to mechanical failure. The P-47s flew approximately 340 ground attack sorties. Loss rate, 1.7%. For comparison, German ground attack aircraft were losing 8 to 12% per mission. The FW-190 in the ground attack role had a loss rate of approximately 6%. The P-47 was suffering one-third the losses while delivering similar damage. The armor, the intelligence officer continued. The P-47 has extensive armor plating around the engine and cockpit. Pilots report that ground fire rarely causes critical damage. The aircraft absorbs the hits and keeps flying. Stigler remembered Captain Cook's P-47. 127 holes. Still flying. That wasn't luck. That was design. The Americans had built a fighter that could do the job of 3 different aircraft types: air superiority fighter, bomber escort, ground attack aircraft, all in one airframe, and the P-47 excelled at all 3 roles. German doctrine required specialized aircraft. The Bf-109 for air superiority, the FW-190 for interception and limited ground attack, the Ju-87 Stuka for precision ground attack. 3 different aircraft, 3 different training pipelines, 3 different maintenance requirements. The Americans had 1 aircraft, 1 training program, 1 spare parts system, 1 maintenance procedure, industrial efficiency. The intelligence officer showed another document. American production numbers. Current estimates indicate the Americans are producing approximately 12 P-47s per day. That's 84 per week, 360 per month, 4,320 per year. Mitush looked at Stigler. "How many FW-190s do we produce per month?" "Approximately 250, Stigler said. "All variants combined." The Americans were building 1.5 times as many P-47s as Germany was building FW-190s. And the P-47 could do 3 jobs, the FW-190 could do 2. The mathematics were exponential. Every month, the Americans gained approximately 110 P-47s over German production. Over a year, that was 1,320 additional fighters. Over 2 years, 2,640. And those were conservative estimates. American production was accelerating. The factories were expanding. The assembly lines were optimizing. By early 1944, intelligence predicted American production would reach 15 P-47s per day. Germany couldn't match that. Germany didn't have the aluminum, didn't have the factory space, didn't have the workers, didn't have the resources. Germany was being buried in American industrial production, and the P-47 was just one fighter type. The Americans were also building P-38s, P-51s, B-17s, B-24s, transports, trainers, every category of aircraft. Stigler thought about his first encounter with the P-47. September 8th. He'd called it fast. He'd recommended that it not be underestimated. But even then, he hadn't understood the full scope of the problem. The P-47 wasn't just a good fighter, it was a system, a complete combat system that integrated air superiority, bomber escort, and ground attack into one survivable, maintainable, mass-producible airframe. It was industrial warfare at its most efficient, and Germany had nothing that could compete with it. November 5, 1943, Stigler's personal diary. Stigler kept a personal diary separate from his official combat reports. In it, he wrote observations, thoughts, things he couldn't say in official documents. November 5, 1943. Entry: Today I watched a damaged P-47 fly home with one landing gear collapsed, half its tail missing, and the engine trailing smoke. The pilot landed successfully. The aircraft will be repaired and flying again within a week. If a FW-190 suffered similar damage, the pilot would bail out. The aircraft would be a total loss. We are not fighting individual pilots anymore. We are fighting American factories. And factories don't get tired, don't run out of courage, don't make mistakes. They just produce. Every day. More aircraft, better aircraft. We shoot down one P-47, 3 more arrive the next week. This is not a war we can win through skill. This is arithmetic, and the arithmetic favors America. Stigler never showed this diary entry to his commanders, but he filed it away. He understood what was happening. Germany was losing. Not because German pilots weren't skilled, they were. Stigler had 37 kills. Miatusch had 43. JG-26 had multiple aces with over 50 victories. But skill didn't matter when you were outnumbered 5-1. When the enemy could lose aircraft and replace them in days. When your own losses took months to replace. The P-47 had stopped being a joke in September. By November, it had become a nightmare, and it was just getting started. December 11, 1943, over Pas-de-Calais, France, 1:14 p.m. Stigler spotted them at 1:14 in the afternoon, 12 P-47s, flying racetrack patterns at 22,000 feet, circling, waiting, protecting a bomber formation that had already passed into Germany 30 minutes earlier. These P-47s were the stragglers, the sweep, the hunters, looking for German fighters coming up late, looking for easy kills. Stigler's flight had 8 FW-190s, 8 against 12. Not good odds, but not impossible. He'd learned new tactics. Don't dive away. Don't try to match their speed. Use altitude. Use the sun. Use surprise, force them into turning fights where the FW-190's roll rate gave an advantage. Stigler keyed his radio. Jaeger lead to all aircraft. We climb above them, attack from the sun, one pass, break away low, don't engage in extended combat. 7 acknowledgments. The German formation climbed northeast, circling wide, gaining altitude, 24,000 feet, 26,000, 28,000. The P-47s were below them now, still circling, still waiting. Stigler checked the sun position. Perfect. Coming from behind and above. The Americans would be blinded. They'd never see the attack until it was too late. At 1:29 p.m., Stigler rolled, inverted, and dove. 7 FW-190s followed. The dive angle was steep. 60 degrees. Speed building, 400 miles per hour, 450, 500. The P-47s grew larger in his gun sight. He picked a target, the last aircraft in the formation, slightly separated, maybe 50 yards behind the others. Range, 600 yards, 500, 400. The P-47 pilot saw them. Too late. Stigler fired. 3-second burst. His cannons and machine guns converged on the P-47's fuselage. He saw strikes, flashes, metal tearing. The P-47 rolled left, diving, trying to escape. Stigler followed, fired again. More strikes. The P-47's engine was smoking. Black smoke. Oil. The propeller was windmilling. No power. The American pilot was going down. But then Stigler's world exploded. Tracer rounds. Coming from above, behind, hitting his FW-190. Multiple impacts. The wing. The fuselage. The canopy cracked. A bullet went through the plexiglass 6 inches from his head. Stigler broke hard right, rolled, dove. Another P-47. Where had it come from? He looked up through the canopy, saw them. 4 more P-47s, higher. They'd been above the formation, top cover. Stigler hadn't seen them. He'd been focused on the lower group. The Americans had baited him. The 12 visible P-47s were the bait. 4 more had been hidden above, waiting, watching for exactly this kind of attack. Now those 4 were diving, and Stigler was alone. His flight had scattered. The disciplined formation was gone. 8 German fighters had become 8 individuals trying to survive. The P-47 behind Stigler was closing, fast, diving faster than his FW-190. Stigler pulled hard left. 4 Gs, 5. The FW-190 turned, but the P-47 anticipated, cut inside the turn, shortened the radius. The American pilot knew exactly what he was doing. This wasn't a rookie. This was an experienced fighter pilot who understood energy management, who understood geometry, who knew how to kill. Stigler reversed, rolled right, pulled through. His engine was screaming. His airframe was shaking. He was at maximum performance. The FW-190 couldn't do more. The P-47 stayed with him. Range, 80 yards, 70. Stigler saw the nose light up again. 8 machine guns, all firing. He broke down, pushed the stick forward, -G. His body lifted against the straps. Loose objects floated. His vision grayed. The tracers passed over his canopy. Missed by feet. Stigler pulled through, rolled, climbed. Every defensive maneuver he knew, every trick he'd learned in 3 years of combat. The P-47 followed. Not perfectly. The American pilot was good, but not perfect. Stigler was creating separation. 20 yards, 30, 40. Then Stigler did something desperate. He chopped throttle, deployed flaps, slowed down. The FW-190 decelerated from 380 miles per hour to 220 in 4 seconds. The P-47 overshot, flashed past, now in front of Stigler. For 3 seconds, Stigler had a shot. He fired, full deflection, leading the target. His tracers reached out, struck the P-47's fuselage, wing root, engine cowling. The P-47 shuddered, smoke, but kept flying. The American pilot rolled left and dove, full power, escaping. Stigler didn't chase. He was out of position, out of energy, out of time. He looked around, empty sky. The engagement had scattered everyone. The P-47s had broken pursuit. The FW-190s had disengaged. Stigler turned northwest, heading home. His fuel was low. His aircraft was damaged. He'd taken hits. Not critical, but not good. He checked his watch. 1:37 p.m. The engagement had lasted 8 minutes. It felt like 8 hours. December 11th, 1943. Post-mission debriefing, Lille Nord. 3:15 p.m. Stigler landed at 2:48 p.m. The ground crew counted 18 bullet holes in his FW-190. Most were .50 caliber. One had struck the main spar, 2 inches to the left, and his wing would have failed. The debriefing was grim. JG-26 had lost 3 aircraft, 2 pilots killed, 1 missing. They'd claimed 1 P-47 destroyed, 1 P-47 probable, 1 kill, 3 losses, a 3-to-1 exchange ratio in favor of the Americans. Miatush wasn't present. He was visiting another pilot in the hospital, Lieutenant Peter Crump, 23 years old, 12 kills. His FW-190 had been hit by P-47 fire. The cockpit had been shredded. Crump had taken 3 bullets, shoulder, leg, abdomen. He'd managed to bail out. Farmers had found him. He'd survive, but he wouldn't fly again. Stigler sat in the briefing room after the other pilots left. He was alone with his thoughts. 3 pilots gone, 1 day, 1 engagement, 8 minutes. And the P-47s? They'd flown home, probably landed in England. Ground crews would patch the holes, reload the ammunition, refuel. The aircraft would be ready to fly again tomorrow. The pilots? They'd drink coffee, write letters home, sleep in heated barracks, eat hot meals, wake up the next morning and do it again. The German pilots who died today wouldn't be replaced for months. The Luftwaffe training pipeline was struggling. New pilots were arriving with 60 hours of flight time, sometimes less. They lasted an average of 4 missions before being killed or seriously wounded. The Americans had training programs producing pilots with 200 hours, well-trained, well-equipped, flying aircraft like the P-47 that could bring them home even when damaged. Stigler opened his personal diary. He wrote the date, December 11, 1943. He wrote one sentence. "We are not fighting pilots anymore. We are fighting a system that can afford to lose and still win." December 20th, 1943. Intelligence report, P-47 combat effectiveness. 9 days after Stigler's engagement, Luftwaffe intelligence compiled a comprehensive analysis of P-47 combat effectiveness. The report covered September through December 1943, 4 months of data, hundreds of engagements. The numbers were devastating. In air-to-air combat, P-47s had destroyed 243 German fighters. The Luftwaffe had destroyed 87 P-47s, a kill ratio of 2.8 to 1 in favor of the Americans. But the real damage was in ground attack. P-47s had destroyed or damaged 147 locomotives, 893 railway cars, 34 fuel depots, 12 ammunition dumps, 8 airfields, 67 communication facilities, all in 4 months. All while also escorting bombers and engaging in air-to-air combat. The report concluded with a warning. The P-47 Thunderbolt represents a fundamental shift in American air doctrine. It is not merely a fighter aircraft. It is a multi-role combat system designed to achieve air superiority through attrition. American losses are acceptable because American production can replace them. German losses are unsustainable because our production cannot. If current trends continue, the Luftwaffe will lose air superiority over Western Europe by mid-1944. Mitush read the report. He passed it to Stigler. "Your thoughts?" he asked. Stigler closed the folder. "The report is correct. We're losing, not because we're not brave, not because we're not skilled. We're losing because arithmetic doesn't care about courage." Mitush was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "How long do you think we have?" Stigler looked at the kill ratios, the production numbers, the loss rates. 6 months, he said. Maybe 8. By summer of 1944, the Americans will have complete air superiority. We won't be able to contest them. We'll be fighting for survival, not victory. Mitush nodded slowly. "Then we keep fighting. Every day we delay them is one more day for Germany." Stigler understood. They weren't fighting to win anymore. They were fighting to delay the inevitable, to buy time. For what, he didn't know. But orders were orders. He would keep flying, keep fighting, keep facing P-47s that were faster, tougher, and more numerous than anything he'd encountered before. And he would watch his friends die, one by one, until there was no one left, or until the war ended, whichever came first. January 11, 1944, over Brussels, Belgium. 11:22 a.m. The winter sky was clear, perfect visibility. Temperature at 24,000 feet, minus 35 degrees Celsius. Stigler's breath fogged inside his oxygen mask. His gloved hands were numb on the control stick despite the heated cockpit. He was leading a 4-ship formation, 4 FW-190s, hunting. Intelligence reported a small American formation, maybe 40 bombers, light escort, an opportunity. At 11:22, Stigler saw them, but the count was wrong. Not 40 bombers, 60, maybe 70, B-17s and B-24s mixed, flying in multiple combat boxes. And the escort wasn't light. Stigler counted approximately 120 fighters. Most were P-47s, flying in layers, high cover at 28,000 feet, middle cover at 25,000, low cover at 22,000, and sweep flights at 20,000, hunting for German interceptors. The Americans had brought 3 fighters for every bomber, 3 to 1. Stigler keyed his radio. "Jaeger lead to all aircraft. Abort attack. Too many escorts. We're returning to base." His wingman responded immediately. Acknowledged. But before Stigler could turn away, his number 3 called out, "Jaeger lead. Bandits high. 6 o'clock. Diving! Stigler looked back. P-47s. 4 of them. Coming down from 30,000 feet. They'd been above the formation. Waiting. Watching for exactly this kind of German probe. The Americans weren't just escorting anymore. They were hunting. Stigler broke left. All aircraft defensive break. Split and evade. The 4 FW-190s scattered. Standard defensive doctrine. Make yourself a difficult target. Force the attackers to choose one defender. Give your wingmen time to escape. The 4 P-47s split into 2 pairs. 2 went after Stigler. 2 went after his wingman. Stigler dove, not straight down. That would give the P-47s a speed advantage. He dove at a 45-degree angle, spiral, left, then right, changing direction every 3 seconds, making himself unpredictable. The P-47s followed, but they didn't fire immediately. They were patient, waiting for Stigler to make a mistake, waiting for him to straighten out, to commit to a direction. Stigler checked his altitude, 22,000 feet, 19,000, 16,000. The P-47s were still there, 200 yards behind, closing slowly. At 14,000 feet, Stigler leveled out. He was at maximum speed, 420 miles per hour, the FW-190's limit in level flight. He looked back. The P-47s were still closing. They were faster, even in level flight. That shouldn't be possible. The intelligence report said the P-47 was optimized for high altitude, above 25,000 feet. Down here at 14,000, the FW-190 should be faster, but the reports were wrong, or outdated, or the Americans had improved the P-47. Stigler pulled into a climbing turn. Left, maximum G, 4 Gs. The FW-190's airframe groaned. His vision tunneled. Gray edges. He held the turn. 5 seconds. 6, 7. He rolled out, checked behind. The P-47s had followed the turn. They'd climbed with him. They hadn't lost ground. This wasn't September. This wasn't October. These American pilots weren't rookies learning how to use their aircraft. They were experienced. They knew the P-47's capabilities. They knew how to fight. And they knew they had Stigler trapped. At 11:28, Stigler made a decision. He rolled inverted, pulled through, split S, maximum negative G. His body slammed into the shoulder straps. Loose items floated. His vision went red, blood rushing to his head. He came out at 9,000 feet, heading southeast, full throttle, running. The P-47s followed, but at 9,000 feet, something changed. The P-47s were gaining faster now, not slowly, rapidly. They were 50 yards closer every 5 seconds. Stigler realized what was happening. The turbocharger. At high altitude, the P-47's turbo supercharger gave it an advantage. But down here, at low altitude, the turbocharger was producing boost, supercharging the engine, increasing power output beyond normal levels. The P-47 at low altitude was even faster than at high altitude. Stigler was out of options. He couldn't outrun them, couldn't outdive them, couldn't outclimb them. His only chance was to turn, to force them into a slow-speed turning fight where the FW-190's maneuverability might give him an edge. He pulled hard left, maximum turn, flaps deployed, speed dropped to 180 miles per hour, minimum controllable speed, maximum turn rate. The P-47s overshot. For 2 seconds, Stigler had a deflection shot. He fired, full burst, cannons and machine guns. His tracers reached out toward the lead P-47. No hits. The P-47s climbed, looped, came back around. Stigler was slow, vulnerable. He retracted flaps, added power, accelerated. But the P-47s were already setting up another attack. Then Stigler's radio crackled. Jaeger 3 to Jaeger lead. I'm hit. I'm going down. Stigler looked east, saw smoke, a FW-190 spinning, no parachute. His number 3, Feldwebel Hans Meyer, 21 years old, 8 kills, dead. The P-47s that had been chasing Meyer were now circling, looking for another target. Stigler was alone, 4 P-47s hunting him, 2 more available if needed. No support, no help coming. He made the only choice that made sense. He ran, full throttle, southeast, low altitude, hugging the trees. The P-47s followed for 30 seconds, then they broke off. They weren't chasing stragglers anymore. They were returning to the bombers. Stigler flew southeast for 10 minutes, then turned north, wide arc, avoiding the bomber stream. He landed at Lille Nord at 11:52 a.m. His flight of 4 had accomplished nothing. They'd been driven off before reaching the bombers. They'd lost 1 pilot, 0 kills, 0 damage to the enemy. The P-47s had done their job perfectly. March 6, 1944, the day Berlin burned. On the same day that General Oberst Stumpf watched 1,200 B-17s over Berlin and wrote "Fertig" in his diary, Franz Stigler was in the air over northern France. He didn't see Berlin burn. He was defending against a diversionary raid. 400 B-24s hitting targets in western Germany, escorted by over 200 fighters, mostly P-47s. Stigler's squadron engaged at 1:34 p.m., 12 FW-190s against approximately 40 P-47s. The engagement lasted 11 minutes. JG-26 shot down 2 P-47s, probable third. JG-26 lost 5 FW-190s, 4 pilots killed, 1 wounded, 5 for 2. The worst exchange ratio Stigler had ever experienced. When he landed, Miatush was waiting with casualty reports, not just from JG-26, from across the entire Western Front. Over 200 German fighters lost, approximately 80 American bombers and fighters destroyed, 200 for 80, 2.5 to 1. Germany couldn't sustain that. Germany couldn't replace 250 fighters, not in a week, not in a month. Training pipelines were already stretched. Experienced instructors were being sent to combat units to fill gaps. New pilots were arriving with 40 hours of flight time, sometimes 30. The Americans had lost 80 aircraft. They'd replace them in 6 days. And the pilots? They had thousands waiting, fully trained, 200 hours each, ready to fly, ready to fight. That evening, Stigler wrote in his diary, March 6, 1944. Today we learned that courage is not enough, skill is not enough, experience is not enough. The Americans have built a system that doesn't need to be better. It just needs to be more. And they have more of everything. More aircraft, more pilots, more fuel, more ammunition, more time. We have less of everything, including hope. April 15, 1944. Pilot casualties and the mathematics of defeat. By mid-April 1944, JG-26 had lost 38 pilots since January 1st, dead, wounded, or missing. 106 days, 38 pilots, 1 pilot every 2.8 days. The replacement rate was approximately 6 pilots per month, 18 pilots in 3 months. To replace 38 losses, the squadron was losing pilots twice as fast as they could be replaced, and the quality was declining. The pilots arriving in April 1944 had an average of 50 hours flight time. Some had never fired their guns in training. Some had never practiced formation flying. Some had never seen a P-47 except in photographs. On April 15th, a new pilot arrived, Unteroffizier Klaus Hartmann, 19 years old, 47 hours total flight time, 6 hours in the FW-190, 0 combat experience. Stigler was assigned to fly as his instructor, to teach him how to survive. They flew together on April 17th. A training flight, no combat, just formations, tactics, radio procedures. Hartmann struggled. He couldn't hold position. His turns were sloppy. His radio discipline was poor. But he was brave, eager. He wanted to fight. On April 19th, Hartmann flew his first combat mission. Stigler led the flight, 4 aircraft, intercepting bombers over Antwerp. They encountered P-47s at 24,000 feet. The engagement lasted 4 minutes. Hartmann died in the first 30 seconds. A P-47 caught him from behind. 8 machine guns, 5-second burst. Hartmann's FW-190 came apart in midair. Fuselage severed. Wings separated. No parachute. Just pieces falling toward Belgium. Klaus Hartmann, 19 years old. 47 hours flight time. 1 combat mission. Survived 30 seconds. Stigler didn't write about Hartmann in his official report. He just noted, 1 pilot lost, P-47 attack. But in his personal diary he wrote, "We are sending children to die. The Luftwaffe is no longer a fighting force. We are a delaying action, buying time with blood. And the Americans keep coming. More P-47s, more pilots, more bombs. An endless stream of industrial power. We cannot win. We can only die bravely, and hope that history remembers we tried." June 6, 1944, D-Day, over Normandy beaches. 7:43 a.m. Stigler took off from Lille Nord at 6:58 a.m. Emergency scramble. All available aircraft. Reports were flooding in. Allied invasion. Normandy coast. Massive naval force. Thousands of ships. Paratroopers. Gliders. Amphibious landings. The invasion everyone had expected and feared. Stigler's orders were simple: attack the invasion fleet, destroy landing craft, strafe the beaches, disrupt the landings, stop the invasion. He led 8 FW-190s northwest, toward the coast, toward the sound of naval gunfire that could be heard 50 miles inland. At 7:32, Stigler saw the coast, and he understood immediately that Germany had already lost. The English Channel was covered with ships, not dozens, not hundreds, thousands, battleships, cruisers, destroyers, transport ships, landing craft, supply vessels, an armada that stretched from horizon to horizon, and above them, aircraft, everywhere. Stigler had never seen so many aircraft in one place: P-47s, P-51s, P-38s, Spitfires, Typhoons, Hurricanes, flying in layers, high cover, medium cover, low cover, combat air patrol, fighter sweeps, ground attack formations. The sky was full of Allied aircraft. Stigler tried to count them, gave up after reaching 200 visible contacts. He keyed his radio. "Jaeger, lead to all aircraft. We cannot attack the fleet. Too many escorts. We'll target ground forces inland. Follow me." He turned east, away from the beaches, away from the fleet, away from the hundreds of Allied fighters. But the Allied fighters found them anyway. At 7:43 a.m., 6 P-47s dove from 12,000 feet. Stigler saw them. "Break right, defensive." The 8 FW-190s scattered, standard doctrine, but the P-47s didn't scatter. They worked in pairs, disciplined, coordinated. 2 P-47s attacked Stigler, 2 attacked his wingman, 2 attacked his second element. The Americans had learned. This wasn't September 1943. These pilots had 9 months of combat experience. They knew German tactics, knew how to counter them. Stigler broke hard left. The P-47s followed. He reversed right. They anticipated, cut inside his turn. They were reading him, predicting his moves. At 7:44, Stigler's wingman died. Lieutenant Dieter Hoffmann, 24 years old, 19 kills. A good pilot, experienced, careful. The P-47s caught him in a crossfire. 2 aircraft attacking from opposite sides. Hoffmann tried to evade one, flew directly into the guns of the other. His FW-190 exploded. No parachute, just fire and debris. Stigler pulled vertical. Climbing, maximum power. The FW-190 clawed for altitude. 8,000 feet, 9,000, 10,000. The P-47s followed, climbing with him, not falling behind, not stalling, just climbing, maintaining position. At 11,000 feet, Stigler ran out of energy. His airspeed dropped below 120 miles per hour. The FW-190 shuddered, approaching stall. He pushed forward, nosed over, dove. The P-47s were right there. They'd been waiting for exactly this. They rolled inverted and followed him down. Stigler pulled through at 6,000 feet, heading east, full throttle, running again. But this time the P-47s didn't break off. They chased him for 5 miles, 10 miles, 15 miles inland. They had fuel. They had time. They had orders to hunt German aircraft as far inland as necessary. At 7:52, Stigler finally lost them. He dove into a valley, hugged the terrain. The P-47s broke off, went back to the coast, back to the invasion, back to their mission. Stigler flew east for another 10 minutes, then landed at a forward airfield at Argentan. He needed fuel. His tanks were nearly empty. While refueling, he learned the casualties. Of the 8 FW-190s that had taken off with him, 3 had returned, 5 lost, 5 pilots dead, 0 Allied aircraft destroyed, 0 damage to the invasion fleet, 0 impact on the landings. The Luftwaffe had thrown everything it had at the invasion, over 300 sorties throughout the entire day. The Allies flew over 14,000 sorties. 14,000. 300 versus 14,000. A ratio of 47-1. Germany didn't control the sky over Normandy. Germany didn't even contest it. The Allies owned it. Completely, totally, without question. And Stigler knew that D-Day wasn't just an invasion, it was a demonstration. The Allies showing Germany what industrial power looked like. What happened when you fought a nation that could produce 47 aircraft for every one of yours? That could lose 100 fighters in a day and replace them in a week. Stigler refueled, took off, flew back to Lille Nord. He never wrote an official combat report for D-Day. What could he say? That he'd fled? That he'd watched 5 pilots die? That he'd accomplished nothing? But in his personal diary, he wrote one sentence. June 6, 1944. Today I watched the sky belong to someone else. June 20th, 1944. The last dogfight. 2 weeks after D-Day, Stigler encountered P-47s for the last time in air-to-air combat. It happened over Caen. The Americans were pushing inland. Ground forces were advancing. P-47s were flying ground attack missions, strafing, bombing, destroying anything German. Stigler was leading a flight of 6 FW-190s. They'd been ordered to intercept American fighter bombers, stop them from attacking German supply convoys. At 2:17 p.m. they found them, 4 P-47s, low altitude, 1,500 feet, just finishing a strafing run on a German truck convoy. Stigler had altitude, 8,000 feet. He had position, he had surprise. For the first time in months he had tactical advantage. He dove. His flight followed. 6 FW-190s attacking 4 P-47s from above. This should work. This should be a kill. The P-47 saw them at the last second. They dropped their external fuel tanks, went to full power, turned into the attack. Stigler fired at 400 yards. Missed. The lead P-47 broke hard right. Stigler followed. Fired again. 300 yards. More strikes. He saw impacts on the P-47's wing, fuselage. The P-47 kept flying, kept turning. The pilot was good, experienced. He was using his aircraft's strengths, energy retention, dive speed, durability. Stigler stayed with him. This was his best chance, his best setup. If he couldn't kill this P-47, he might never kill another one. They spiraled down, 6,000 feet, 4,000, 2,000. Stigler was gaining, closing the distance. His gun sight was tracking, leading. He fired. 3-second burst. Solid hits. The P-47's engine smoked. The propeller slowed. Finally, the P-47 rolled inverted, pointed at the ground. The pilot was bailing out. Stigler had won. But then the other 3 P-47s arrived. They'd climbed, repositioned. They came down on Stigler's flight from above. The tables had turned, again. 8-gun salvos, multiple P-47s firing. Stigler's number 4 exploded, just came apart. Unteroffizier Paul Schmidt, 22 years old, 6 kills, dead. Stigler broke off. All aircraft, disengage, disengage. The 5 surviving FW-190s ran. The P-47s chased them for 3 minutes, then broke off, went back to their mission, back to attacking ground targets. Stigler had shot down 1 P-47. His 41st victory. It would be his last. Because after June 20th, Stigler stopped flying combat missions against Allied fighters. He was reassigned to jet training. The Luftwaffe was transitioning to the Me-262 jet fighter. Experienced pilots like Stigler were needed to train the next generation. He never fought a P-47 again. August 1944. The final statistics. By August 1944, the Luftwaffe compiled final statistics on P-47 combat effectiveness. The report covered September 1943 through July 1944. 11 months of combat. Показывает таблицу с цифрами. P-47 units had flown approximately 546,000 combat sorties, 546,000, over Western Europe in 11 months. They had destroyed 3,752 German aircraft in air-to-air combat. They had lost 1,670 P-47s to all causes, a kill ratio of 2.24 to 1. But the air-to-air statistics didn't tell the whole story. In ground attack missions, P-47s had destroyed or damaged 6,000 locomotives, 68,000 railway cars, 9,000 trucks, 6,000 armored vehicles, 86,000 other vehicles, countless bridges, fuel depots, ammunition dumps, and communication facilities. The P-47 hadn't just won air superiority. It had destroyed Germany's ability to move supplies, to reinforce positions, to retreat, to fight. Every bridge destroyed meant divisions trapped. Every locomotive destroyed meant troops without ammunition, without food, without fuel. The P-47 had done what strategic bombing couldn't do. It had cut Germany's arteries, and Germany had bled. Franz Stigler read the report in his quarters. He was training on the Me-262 now, learning to fly at 500 miles per hour, learning to fight at speeds where P-47s couldn't follow. But he knew it was too late. The Me-262 was faster than a P-47, more heavily armed. In capable hands it was deadly. But Germany had produced one $400 Me-262s. America had produced 15,683 P-47s. The arithmetic hadn't changed. It had just gotten worse. May 8, 1945, VE Day, Allied prisoner of war camp, Reims, France. Franz Stigler surrendered to American forces on May 2, 1945, 6 days before the official German surrender. He'd been flying Me-262s in the final weeks. Fast missions, desperate missions, missions that accomplished nothing. When he surrendered, he handed over his logbook. 487 combat missions, 41 confirmed victories. 28 of those were four-engine bombers. 13 were fighters. Only one was a P-47. The American intelligence officer who processed him noticed. "You fought P-47s for almost 2 years. Why only one kill?" Stigler spoke English. He'd learned it before the war. He understood the question. "Because the P-47 was very difficult to kill," he said. "I hit many, but they kept flying. Only once did I hit one enough to make it go down. The others always went home." The intelligence officer made notes. Stigler was classified as a valuable intelligence source. Experienced Luftwaffe fighter pilot, combat against American aircraft, knowledge of German tactics and capabilities. He was moved to a special interrogation facility near Paris, not a harsh camp, just a place where Allied intelligence interviewed German officers who had useful information. Over 3 weeks in May 1945, Stigler was interviewed extensively. They asked about the Me-262, about German tactics, about Luftwaffe capabilities, but they also asked about the P-47. "When did you first encounter P-47s?" "September 8, 1943, over central Germany." "What were your initial impressions?" Stigler paused. He remembered that day, the dive, the speed, the 8 machine guns. "I thought it was fast, faster than I expected, heavier than anything we had, but effective." "Did you mock the P-47? Other German pilots called it the Jug." "Yes. In the beginning we mocked it. We thought it was too heavy, too slow, too ugly, but after September, the mockery stopped." "Why?" "Because it started killing us. The intelligence officer leaned forward. "Tell me about the P-47's strengths." Stigler thought for a moment. Then he spoke for 10 minutes. About the dive speed, the armament, the durability, the range, the versatility. He talked about ground attack capability, about pilots flying home with damage that should have been fatal, about American production, about tactics that evolved from escort to hunter to ground attack. When he finished, the intelligence officer said, "You sound like you respect the aircraft." "I do," Stigler said. "The P-47 was the best fighter bomber of the war, not the fastest, not the most maneuverable, but the most effective. It did 3 jobs and did all of them well. If I could have chosen any Allied fighter to fly, I would have chosen the P-47. That interview was documented, filed, archived. 60 years later, historians would find it in the National Archives. Stigler's words, his assessment, his respect for the aircraft that had helped defeat him. July 1947. Stigler returns to Germany. Stigler was released from Allied custody in June 1947. 2 years after the war ended, he returned to Germany, to a country that no longer existed. The Germany he'd known was divided, occupied, destroyed. He didn't fly again, not as a pilot, not commercially. The Allies had banned former Luftwaffe pilots from aviation for 10 years. By the time the ban was lifted, Stigler was too old. His reflexes weren't what they'd been. His eyes weren't as sharp. He became an engineer, worked for a German aviation company, designing civilian aircraft, small planes, nothing military, nothing fast, just honest work. He never talked about the war, not publicly. His family knew he'd been a pilot. His children knew he'd survived, but they didn't know the details, didn't know about the P-47s, didn't know about the pilots who'd died, didn't know about the diary entries where he'd written that Germany was losing. In 1982, Stigler was invited to an aviation history conference in England. 70 years old, retired, living quietly in Bavaria. The conference was about Allied fighter tactics in World War II. Stigler attended as an observer. He sat in the audience, listened to presentations, heard American historians talk about P-47 operations, about kill ratios, about ground attack effectiveness. During a break, an elderly American approached him. "Excuse me, are you Franz Stigler?" Stigler nodded. "Yes." The American extended his hand. "Robert Johnson, 56th Fighter Group. I flew P-47s." They shook hands. 2 fighter pilots, 70 years old, former enemies, meeting for the first time since the war. Johnson said, "I read your interrogation report from 1945. You said the P-47 was the best fighter bomber of the war." "I did say that," Stigler confirmed. "Why?" Stigler thought about the question, thought about September 1943, about December, about D-Day, about watching P-47s dive faster than his FW-190, about seeing them absorb damage and keep flying, about the mathematics that he couldn't overcome. "Because it won," Stigler said simply. "The P-47 did what it was designed to do. It achieved air superiority. It protected bombers. It destroyed ground targets. It brought pilots home, and it did all of that consistently for 2 years. That is why it was the best." Johnson nodded slowly. "We lost a lot of good men flying those aircraft." "I know," Stigler said. "I shot at many of them. I killed some. But most of you went home. That was the difference. Most of my friends did not." They talked for an hour about tactics, about aircraft performance, about what it felt like to fly at 400 miles per hour with someone shooting at you, about fear, about survival, about luck. At the end of the conversation, Johnson said, "If you'd been flying a P-47, you would have been a dangerous opponent." Stigler smiled. It was a sad smile. "Perhaps, but I was flying a FW-190, and that is why you won." May 8, 1945, VE Day, Allied prisoner of war camp, Reims, France. Franz Stigler surrendered to American forces on May 2, 1945, 6 days before the official German surrender. He'd been flying Me-262s in the final weeks. Fast missions, desperate missions, missions that accomplished nothing. When he surrendered, he handed over his logbook. 487 combat missions, 41 confirmed victories. 28 of those were four-engine bombers. 13 were fighters. Only one was a P-47. The American intelligence officer who processed him noticed. "You fought P-47s for almost 2 years. Why only one kill?" Stigler spoke English. He'd learned it before the war. He understood the question. "Because the P-47 was very difficult to kill," he said. "I hit many, but they kept flying. Only once did I hit one enough to make it go down. The others always went home." The intelligence officer made notes. Stigler was classified as a valuable intelligence source. Experienced Luftwaffe fighter pilot, combat against American aircraft, knowledge of German tactics and capabilities. He was moved to a special interrogation facility near Paris, not a harsh camp, just a place where Allied intelligence interviewed German officers who had useful information. Over 3 weeks in May 1945, Stigler was interviewed extensively. They asked about the Me-262, about German tactics, about Luftwaffe capabilities, but they also asked about the P-47. "When did you first encounter P-47s?" "September 8, 1943, over central Germany." "What were your initial impressions?" Stigler paused. He remembered that day, the dive, the speed, the 8 machine guns. "I thought it was fast, faster than I expected, heavier than anything we had, but effective." "Did you mock the P-47? Other German pilots called it the Jug." "Yes. In the beginning we mocked it. We thought it was too heavy, too slow, too ugly, but after September, the mockery stopped." "Why?" "Because it started killing us." The intelligence officer leaned forward. "Tell me about the P-47's strengths." Stigler thought for a moment. Then he spoke for 10 minutes. About the dive speed, the armament, the durability, the range, the versatility. He talked about ground attack capability, about pilots flying home with damage that should have been fatal, about American production, about tactics that evolved from escort to hunter to ground attack. When he finished, the intelligence officer said, "You sound like you respect the aircraft." "I do," Stigler said. "The P-47 was the best fighter bomber of the war, not the fastest, not the most maneuverable, but the most effective. It did 3 jobs and did all of them well. If I could have chosen any Allied fighter to fly, I would have chosen the P-47. That interview was documented, filed, archived. 60 years later, historians would find it in the National Archives. Stigler's words, his assessment, his respect for the aircraft that had helped defeat him. July 1947. Stigler returns to Germany. Stigler was released from Allied custody in June 1947. 2 years after the war ended, he returned to Germany, to a country that no longer existed. The Germany he'd known was divided, occupied, destroyed. He didn't fly again, not as a pilot, not commercially. The Allies had banned former Luftwaffe pilots from aviation for 10 years. By the time the ban was lifted, Stigler was too old. His reflexes weren't what they'd been. His eyes weren't as sharp. He became an engineer, worked for a German aviation company, designing civilian aircraft, small planes. This is where we started. March 15, 1944. Oberleutnant Franz Stigler's combat report. 8 words. Das amerikanische Flugzeug sollte nicht unterschätzt werden. The American aircraft should not be underestimated. Those 8 words represented a turning point, not just for Stigler, for the entire Luftwaffe, the moment when mockery turned to respect, when the Jug became the Thunderbolt, when German pilots stopped laughing and started dying. But this story isn't just about one pilot learning to respect one aircraft. This is about what happens when industrial power meets military courage, when factories compete with bravery, when arithmetic defeats skill, The P-47 Thunderbolt, 7 tons of American engineering, called the Jug by pilots who thought it was too heavy to fight, too slow to win, too ugly to fear. They were wrong about all of it. The P-47 wasn't slow. It was the fastest diving fighter in the world, 550 miles per hour, faster than the FW-190, faster than the BF-109, faster than anything with a propeller. The P-47 wasn't weak. It had 8 50 caliber machine guns, 6,400 rounds per minute, enough firepower to saw a fighter in half in one 5-second burst. The P-47 wasn't fragile. It could take hits that would destroy any German fighter. Pilots flew P-47s home with engines shot out, with wings damaged, with tail sections missing. Captain Walter Cook flew 180 miles with 127 holes in his aircraft. The P-47 brought him home, and the P-47 wasn't rare. America built 15,683 of them, one every 98 minutes at peak production. Germany couldn't compete with that, couldn't match that, couldn't survive that. Franz Stigler fought P-47s for 21 months. September 1943 to June 1944. He encountered them 38 times. He shot down one. Not because he wasn't skilled. He had 41 total victories. Not because he wasn't brave. He flew 487 combat missions. He earned the Knight's Cross. He shot down one P-47 because the P-47 was designed to survive, to absorb punishment, to bring pilots home, and to come back the next day and fight again. That was the difference between German and American engineering philosophy. Germany built fighters to win dogfights. America built fighters to win wars. The P-47 won the war, not alone, not single-handedly. But it played a role that no other aircraft could fill. It escorted bombers. It destroyed enemy fighters. It attacked ground targets. It did 3 jobs simultaneously, and it did all 3 better than any other aircraft. In 1982, Franz Stigler met Robert Johnson, 2 fighter pilots, former enemies. They shook hands. They talked. They shared stories. Johnson had shot down 27 German aircraft flying P-47s. Stigler had shot down 41 Allied aircraft flying FW-190s and Me-262s. Different sides, same war, same sky. At the end of their conversation, Stigler said something that Johnson never forgot. "Your aircraft was better than mine, not faster in a turn, not more maneuverable, but better where it mattered. It brought you home. My aircraft did not always bring us home. That is why you won." That's the legacy of the P-47 Thunderbolt. Not speed, not maneuverability, not beauty, survival. The ability to take damage, complete the mission, bring the pilot home, and be ready to fight again tomorrow. That's what won the war. Not just courage, not just skill, but the ability to endure, to survive, to keep fighting when the other side couldn't. If this story moved you the way it moved us, please hit that like button. Every single like tells the algorithm that this piece of history deserves to be remembered, that the pilots who flew P-47s deserve recognition, that the pilots who fought against them deserve respect. We dedicate ourselves to rescuing these forgotten stories from the archives, stories about courage on both sides, about engineering, about humanity in war. If you want to join us in this mission, please subscribe and turn on notifications. We're bringing these stories back to life every week. Real documents, real people, real history. Drop a comment right now and tell us where you're watching from. Are you watching from the United States, United Kingdom, Germany, France, Canada, Australia? Our community spans the entire world, from Texas to Tasmania, from Berlin to Brisbane. You're not just a viewer. You're part of keeping these memories alive. Tell us your location. Tell us if someone in your family served. Tell us if you've ever seen a P-47 at an air show. Just let us know you're here. Let us know this history matters to you. Thank you for ensuring that Oberleutnant Franz Stigler, Captain Robert Johnson, Captain Walter Cook and the 2,973 American pilots who died flying P-47s in combat are not forgotten in silence. Thank you for remembering the 3,499 Luftwaffe pilots who died fighting against them. They were enemies in war, but they were all pilots, all warriors, all men doing their duty. The P-47 Thunderbolt was mocked, then feared, then respected, just like the men who flew it, and just like the men who fought against it. They all deserve to be remembered. These are not just papers. These are not just statistics. These are lives, stories, memories, courage documented on pages that have survived 80 years. And as long as we keep reading them, keep sharing them, keep remembering them, these pilots will never truly die. Thank you for watching. Thank you for remembering.